Somali American poet Ladan Osman published her new book, Exiles of Eden. It's poems steeped in Somali tradition and also reflect on events here in United States, like what happened in Ferguson and Guantánamo and Abu Ghraib, telling the story through the myth of Adam and Eve, questioning what does it mean to be a refugee.
So when I was thinking about Adam and Eve, so for me, when I was a kid, like I just always take a story too far. So you're sitting in Saturday school, or Somali people call it duksi, and they're talking about Adam and Eve, and you're like, this is a very strange story. So these people were exiled from a place that seems like the paradise, but it's not entirely like the paradise. Is the Eden and the paradise separate from each other? They end up on earth. They seem like they're in trouble, but not really, because it seems like they get the gift of earth and of their freedom in a way, even though, but what does it feel to be exiled from a place you call home, but then you come into so much freedom, so that they were just in the Eden and we're trying to come into knowledge, and we're just kind of like naked and innocent is how they're described, but then they're exiled onto the earth, but then the earth is so rich and beautiful, and they have to learn and they have to decide the names. And so those, in the poems that appears in sympathy for Eve and sympathy for Satan, it's like the people, you have a sense of how hard it is to come into a new place, and how you have to learn to live and to learn the names of things, and which people had it the worst is, for me, is Adam and Eve, because they were the first ones who didn't know anything and were just having experiences happen to them. What is the first heartbreak, the first pregnancy, and I would think about this obsessively, like a child. Like as a child, would they, what is it like to deliver the first child alone, or to go to sleep lonely, but there's just two of you on the whole earth, and like how do you resolve that conflict? And so I think that that's the seed of the deep melancholy that humans have sometimes, how we don't seem like satisfied, and we're just kind of looking for something. And then what does it mean for Cain to kill Abel, right? And then Abel presumably goes to the paradise because he's good and is a friend of God. And so it's like, how would Adam and Eve understand that? Oh, where's our son? Oh, he's dead. He was murdered. It's like, what's a murder? What's death? Where is he? And why is he not here? And so the sense of dislocation, I have a body, I have a spirit, this is the earth, this is maybe the paradise, this is maybe the Eden, we don't really know what that is. And so because it's such a powerful story, and one that humans really carry and have translated in so many different ways, the idea of the first people, whether you're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or not, you have this sense of somebody had to be the first, and so the first really suffer, And I think now the earth, so much time has passed, and we're approaching a point where, unfortunately, the earth is in a catastrophic place, is really on the brink, and so we're at the end almost. And I think that the people who are in exile, a lot of that has to do with war, but it has to do with climate change as well. And that's also kind of quietly in the book, this conversation about climate change and how that impacts global movements and exile and just stress and disaster, and not knowing the land that you always knew, to see the land just dissipate, your personal history and heritage dissipate, everything can feel like it's being taken from you. And so I feel like now in this moment, when there's so many refugees, people in exile, internally displaced people, we're the closest that we've been, as far as we understand, like human history is so wide, but because of how we're at the brink of the earth, we're almost extinguishing the planet as we understand it. We're kind of almost coming close to the Adam and Eve story. And I thought that was a really good place to look at how serious this is, and where there's a place for compassion, and where there's a place to maybe correct course and shift things. And so that's why I wanted that to be the central, because the story's so sad to me. Whenever I think of it, I'm like,
I've always thought that even Satan,
Yeah.
Shaitan,
Yeah.
has a moral dilemma.
Right, yeah, because the shaitan questioned God. And the thing is, like, we are so fallible, and I could see myself, for example, the thing that shaitan is known for being bad for asking, like, what place am I in the hierarchy, and to suggest that, if I'm understanding the story properly, that I'm in higher up in the hierarchy than Adam and the angels and this creation, and like, what's my place? And so I think that there's something in it that is also human interpretation has failed us, because I think that the fracture that happened with shaitan is a bit more mysterious than what it is that we can understand. And for me, I think that there's a really important lesson, how it is that we can understand what's like loosely interpreted as arrogance, but that it comes in the form of a question, an aggressive question, an insistence. And also it seems like there is some kind of grace, because I think sometimes we talk about God as this destroyer of everything and doesn't listen to anything.
And think one of his name, destroyer.
Right, and is really terrible, but at the same time, a being like Shaitan had the space to ask questions.
Yes.
And Adam and Eve had the space to defy and to make a mistake. And so sometimes when I think of God, and I think that that's also, sometimes that appears in the hadiths and things, it's like, if we're going to ascribe feelings to God, why are they sometimes so angry and so violent? It's a bit more like, what if God is just looking? You know, like sometimes I imagine a very vast blankness of God just looking, and we in our human selves, we can never like guess what God would have to say or think about these things. But I think for humans, that's very disastrous. You can't challenge the order of things and ask any specific questions. And
in your poetry, you brought the mythology of Adam and Eve on Earth, and you connected to our human disaster and crisis and human tragedy on Earth.
I think for me, what I was more interested in was the longing for Eden, that I would imagine Adam and Eve as having an imprint. And this is the book is dedicated to the poet Bridget Pegeen Kelly, who passed away some years ago, who was a dear friend and mentor. And she had, one of the things that, because she, was really open to me talking about this for years and would just talk about it with me. And so she, was a very mindful person. I think whatever spirituality she had, she was pretty private about it. But she would say that probably the memory of Eden remained with Adam and Eve, but that maybe it was a distant one, because if it were, it would be too painful. I think what she said was it would be too painful and too much of a fracture if they carried the Eden with them when they were on Earth. And so that was also really interesting to me, that the yearning for Eden could even create a mania over paradise. Like, this is what the paradise has to be, and this is how you get there, and whatever it is that I have to do, I'm going to do it, even if it means judging other people here on this earth or harming other people, and in fact defying God sometimes to say I deserve, the paradise. And so I think it, like, maybe that's our inheritance from Adam and Eve, is a deep longing for Eden, or a memory that can't be understood. Maybe it's not even a longing. Maybe they were totally satisfied with the earth that was in front of them and had lives full of curiosity and excitement, but a sense of having come from a place to which you can't return. I think there's necessarily question, melancholy, something about that. And so I was thinking about that a lot, that maybe sometimes as humans we're comfortable raising the earth and being really terrible to the oceans and to the bees and to each other, because we don't think of this as a real place. And so when you think of like the monotheistic religions, the groundwork of them is like, oh, this is just a temporary passing place, and the real place and the reality is somewhere else. And I'm like, that's fine. We can have, even quantum physics accepts that there's many different reality. Like, there's everything can maybe be layered, or it's even undulating in a way that we don't understand. But at the same time, like, we're here now, as far as we understand, and we have a responsibility to now, and we have a responsibility to the things that not only have served us but are innocent in our dilemmas. Like so the bees appear a lot in this book because I really understand the bees to be innocent in the things that are occurring between humans, and yet they suffer the consequences, and in the end we're the ones who suffer when, you know, they can't find their pathways and are not able to pollinate things. And it's like, what's going to happen to us? Much of the food and the beauty of the earth interacts with the bees. Like, what are we doing actually? And so
it's interesting. I thought God made us stewards of the earth. We look after the earth.
Yeah, I think there are many parables. I think probably across a lot of scriptures and human poetry that has existed over time, but definitely in the Quran, they're very tender, tiny, gentle parables, like be careful of the spider's web and be careful of the ant, and these different sayings and hadiths that it's also an act of war to damage a landscape, to just harm a tree. You can't do that. You can't hurt people, and you can't hurt the creatures and the trees. And I think it's amazing to me how it seemed almost immediately in human history, people just decided to ignore them. Like, who cares? And I wonder about that, is like the things that make it possible for us to breathe comfortably and to enjoy the things that nourish our bodies, that we can be careless about that, is really amazing. And what's underneath of it, doesn't it have to be a carelessness about each other and about ourselves? And why? Like, what would that be?
What happened? Europe just rejected religion, and secularism just took over, and especially this was in England, and he said only 2% they go to church every week.
Oh, really?
In England.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And that vacuum, that void, was filled by art. So Europeans look at art as a spiritual experience and fixated on it, and some of them also poetry. So poetry, it's a very spiritual, religious experience, and you alluded to that too. You know, you bring this.
I mean, there's a reason that the scriptures, because we have to. I think of the scriptures as tools for humans and things that we're meant to grapple with and interpret with, and so of course it's written with a sense of pace, breath, a sense of beauty, a sense of romance, because otherwise why would we bother to go back to it? Why would we carry it with us? Why do people fold up scripture and put it in their pocket, or read it at funerals or at weddings, or, you know, when they're crying out in agony, they turn to very often more poetic language. For the people who are religious, it's the scriptures. And for other people, you know, it could be a poem or a song lyric. I think a lot of people turn to song
music
as well.
Too.
Yeah, and so I think that that's so much a part of the rhythm of our existence on this earth, in the same way that the planets and the waters have their rhythm. I think that part of the rhythm for us is we're, as humans, are really inclined to artistic experiences and the transcendence that's possible from that.
As a Somali born, and you grew up in some part of your life in Somalia, and what's the role of poetry to preserve a Somalian heritage, Somali tradition and culture? It seems like it's very powerful in Somalia, even especially in diaspora and exile and all of that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of things happening across the diaspora now in art that are super exciting. There are many Somali artists and interpreters and cultural producers that are just doing incredible work, and very often in concert. And I do think that, just like with most cultures, in the Somali culture, poetry has the space just to be fanciful and to be beautiful and to create a communal experience, and the delight of being technically capable to really make a poem that just sounds like it's running ahead, and it's in some ways irresistible, or to write something that is really just, you know, in praise of someone's like family line, or in praise of a particular person or the world that's around us. But then I think that there's also, you know, if a culture is oral, it's a way of holding the history inside your body. So when you're saying something, you memorize something and you recite it, it's handed down, you're also holding, it's really amazing, you're holding time inside yourself, and you're holding those rhythms and you're interpreting them, and everything is getting like finely tuned across the generations. And it's also the breath and it's the movement that it takes to push the poem out, and to do that in front of a group of people. And so I think that that's also why it's such a powerful tool for resistance. Very often, even when you hear in a random like BBC Africa video, you hear like a woman protesting something, and even the way that she speaks is like, and this 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 and this, and we're fed up. And so you even get a sense of, what I mean, that lyricism. And I do think that that's carried, and it's an incredible source of power that is very, very important to protect.
You're going to do some reading this evening, and can we pick up a poem for us that you're going to read tonight and tell us why you choose it?
So I'm going to actually just read the last poem in the book, which is very long, so
It's fine, you can read that much.
So maybe I'll just read a section of that. We refuse death by spells. We refuse death by attack. We refuse death by falling. And we refuse death in depressions. We refuse the spirits that attempt oppression. And we refuse the spirits that attempt possession. We refuse humans who call themselves gods, who try to graft hellfire onto our bodies and raise columns of fire in our yards. We are looking for better myths. We are tired of falling and finding ourselves underfoot. We are searching the earth for images that draw parables. We left the serpents underfoot in peace and refused their bites. We refuse death by discourse. We refuse death by exile. We refuse death by falling. And we refuse death in depressions. We are looking for a better myth. We've only been looking since Eve.
أرسم أمل بسام ونرسم حضارة ومدن وبرك حمام وأمان